Okay. Hello, ladies. Thank you for joining me today. I am so happy to be here with Carol Cox. She is a great mentor of mine, and I know we're going to learn a ton from her today. Carol, thank you for joining me.
Oh, I am so excited to be here, Erin, and congratulations on your new podcast.
Well, thank you. You had a big part in helping me get here, so thank you so much for that. So I'm going to just read your bio very briefly, and then we're going to hop right into it. So, Carol Cox is the founder and CEO of Speaking Your Brand, a coaching and training company that helps high performing, purpose driven women entrepreneurs and professionals create their signature talks and thought leadership platforms. Carol is host of the weekly 5-star rated Speaking Your Brand podcast, and during election season serves as a Democratic political analyst on TV news. Carol was named as one of Orlando's Women of the Year in 2021 and has been featured in Forbes. Through her company and content, her mission is to empower more women to find and use their voice, to tell the stories that need to be told, and to activate ideas for change. Oh, I love that. I love that.
So thank you. And that's what you're doing here with the podcast.
Well, that is why I'm so happy to have you here. I mean, both of us kind of, work with women to elevate their voices. You do it, very literally with finding their voice and speaking. And I do it through helping them create wealth, which is, of course, a form of voice, of impact and attention and having a voice, certainly in, well, probably always, but certainly these days for sure. So, we want to talk today about both the business side of using our voices as well as the social impact side of using our voices, which is so important for women in our businesses. So tell me about, well, first let's start with your origin story. How did you get started and what's led to where you are today?
Yeah. So maybe like a lot of women, it's a very kind of, winding path. It's definitely not a straight line from what I wanted to do when I was a little girl to today. Probably would have been a lawyer. I think that was kind of like what everyone expected me to do when I was in high school. I was on the speech and debate team, and I definitely like to share opinions and
Ah,
do my research and and show up and debate. And so, but then I decided in college I really loved history. I love learning about other people and cultures and really about how the past informs the present. So I went to graduate school for history and then took a very left turn detour into software development and then into
wow. I did
politics.
not know
I
that
know.
about
Yeah, I
you.
was I was a self-taught programmer. We built large systems for companies like Lowe's and Office Depot. I mean, we did like the whole gamut, created political software when I was involved in politics as the chairperson of my Democratic Party. And then decided after kind of doing the programming route for about 10 years that I was burnt out and really wanted to work more with people than with code. And so I thought, well, I love being an entrepreneur. So what was the next business that I could do? And people had always told me that I was good at public speaking and they enjoyed my presentations. And so I thought, well, let's start a business around that because I knew I needed to find a niche
Mm.
to work in. And little did I know that I thought I was just starting a public speaking company, but really what I was doing was providing this coaching and training and support system for women to really elevate themselves and to share their voices in a bigger way because I had faced backlash when I had done that in my political career and didn't have that support system. And so kind of subconsciously I ended up creating that in this company.
Yeah, I am talking to women about women, and I hear this recurring theme where women, we all started, most of us, in kind of some of us in majority male businesses, and we experienced that kind of otherness and wanting to work with women and wanting to help them find their voices or having a safe place or having a shared language to talk about issues. And for women in particular, with finding their voices, I know you wrote a post that I think it was really moving to me about how exactly you felt silenced. And can you tell us, like, there was a particular story that you told about an event? Can you share that with us?
Sure. So when I was 30 years old, so now looking back, I was very young and somewhat naive in the sense that I really just wanted to have a positive impact. So I became chairperson of my county's Democratic Party, really kind of swept into office by the group of supporters who encouraged me to run. I had just been a volunteer for the couple of years prior to that. They really wanted me to become chairperson. So I, threw my hat in the ring and was elected. And I really saw myself as a way to get more women elected to office. So we ran women candidates for local office in the county. And also I became the media spokesperson for the party. So that's when I went on TV news and became a political analyst. And then, so as I like to say, everything was great until it wasn't, because what happened was that I guess they liked the idea of having a woman leader in theory, but not so much in practice, because I would start hearing things like, oh, there's Carol and her news crew, or, there's Carol basically like having too much of a public voice, having too much of a public presence as a woman. And this was an entirely volunteer position. I poured my heart and soul into it. And so it was really devastating when the people who I thought were closest to me ended up kind of deciding to withdraw their support, but in a very hostile way. And I remember I had to chair this one meeting of the executive committee, and I just didn't want to go. Like, I didn't want to face it. Just like, why? Like, why would you want to put yourself into that? So I decided not to run for reelection as chair. I decided not to run for Congress, which the Democratic leadership had been talking about, because I just didn't have the support system where I felt like I had the resiliency to continue to go through this. And as I say, and this is a keynote that I give, that I lost my voice and my confidence and my purpose for years after that. And it wasn't really until I started this business in 2015 that I started to regain it.
Wow. I mean, that is an extraordinary story, but I'm sure that many of us have felt that in different ways, where when you don't have that support and you do feel actual hostility. I mean, it really, it doesn't always come in the form of, sexual harassment, things like that. Sometimes it can just be that hard stop, that, and you have to ask yourself, like, how much am I willing to tolerate, to go forward? Thank you for sharing that. I know that's a tough one. So, as someone who also works in the kind of working with women space, like, what have you seen recently that's happening? I mean, I know, like, I think it's called the she economy, or there's a lot happening around that women working with women space, and you've been in it for longer, since 2015, and I see a lot more of it recently. Like, so what have you seen in that, women working with women?
Yeah, Erin, this is such a great question. And I have two very opposing views about it. And so, and I think I'd like to live in this world of where I can hold opposing views at the same time. So my first viewpoint is I love it. I thrive working with other women. There's there's been saying that's been going on around forever, is that the system we live in was not built by or for women. It was built to benefit men because of the patriarchal white supremacist society we live in, and so on. And so as women, we try to fit in, like kind of mold ourselves into the system that wasn't really meant for us. And so when we kind of can be in a bubble, which I'm very fortunate to be in, where we work with other women, we kind of we create a new system that works for us, and then we thrive in it. So that's my one viewpoint. Very positive. I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. My other viewpoint, this is my but, is that what I see happening a lot, and I'm as guilty of this as any other woman, is that I tend to gravitate towards women podcasts, women conferences, working with women. And so guess what? When we do that, the men don't get to see us in our full power, our full authority, our full thought leadership, because we stay too much in the bubble. So one of the things I have to be mindful of is making sure I go to conferences where it's all genders, that I apply to speak at conferences that are all genders, and don't just stay comfortable in my bubble.
Yeah, that is such a good point, because I'm certainly, guilty of, staying in the bubble. And for me, frankly, it's comfortable. Absolutely, you and other women who work in the, getting more women on panels, in conferences, talk about getting that number up. And so it's super important for us to get out there and not stay in the bubble. And obviously, having, programs that build our confidence like this, are great for it. When you're talking about, the good parts of you know, kind of going against the patriarchy, I was reminded of an organization. I'm not going to say it, but it basically is helping women lawyers make partner. And and they asked me to join for a while, and I'm not even kind of a traditional lawyer anyway. But I said, I don't know, why would we want to try to figure out how to fit into the way they do partnerships? Like, we hate the way they do it. It's a terrible model. Like, why are we trying to do that? Why aren't we trying to make one that makes more sense, that has more flexibility, that's more, results oriented, and not about like, did you put in your 2,000 billable hours this year? And yeah, so yeah, one, we need to fix the stuff that's wrong, but we also need to play in the bigger playground too. So yeah, I like that. I like that. So one of the things that you talked about is when you've been silenced and how that's it inspired your work. But let's talk about also how women silence themselves. And how does that happen? Why does that happen?
Yeah, Aaron. And I have done this myself, and I'm sure women listening have done this, and it is okay. It is okay. Sometimes we have to take care of ourselves, and sometimes we don't feel like we have the resiliency, or we're just, the strength at the time to put ourselves out there or to be really vocal. And that's okay. Like, you have to trust yourself and what feels right in the situation. Number one. But then, going past that is, I think a lot of us are afraid to share opinions because we see other women do so, and we see what happens to them.
Mm-hmm.
The harassment, the belittlement, the death threats, even, for women on social media, especially,
Mm-hmm.
we see them ridiculed. And so when that happens, then I'm sure subconsciously and maybe even consciously, we think to ourselves, well, why should I put myself out there in the same way? And when we see other women that happens to. And so, but of course, my argument to that is I see us as pioneers, as being the ones to kind of take a little bit of this unfortunate backlash and criticism. So hopefully we're paving the way for the women behind us not to have to deal with it as much as we do, just like the generations that came before us paved the way for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned social media because I only hang out on LinkedIn, frankly.
Me too.
And so I forget about, like, I mean, obviously a lot of our listeners are, kind of hang out at those kind of more, Instagrams and the Facebooks and places like that. And so, like, tell me what's happening over there. Like, I didn't know that
Okay.
that was happening.
All right. So my two favorite social media platforms are LinkedIn. That's the one I use the
Uh-huh.
most. But then Twitter is the one where I consume the most because I follow a
Uh,
lot of reporters, journalists, people who authors and things like that on Twitter. And I have for years because of my background in politics. And so, but I see it on Twitter, even though I'm not so much of a
okay.
participant. But there was a study that was done that says that women online face 27 times more harassment than men do. 27
Wow.
times more harassment. Unbelievable. And so, yes, there's definitely that is going on. And so but okay. So yes, maybe Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. However, Aaron, I've had this experience on LinkedIn as a
Ah.
professional platform back in October of 2020. The vice presidential debate had just happened between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. And so she was being interrupted by him. So she now famously said, I'm speaking. And, I kind of shut that down. And so that was kind of the meme that was going on. So I posted regarding that. And I mentioned, about the vice presidential debate. I had a picture of her with it, her saying, I'm speaking, and then talked about, our mission to, raise women's voices, etc. Well, because it was a public post, I had so many men who were not connected to me, but they weren't,
Mhm.
connections. So many men come on there and talk about how ugly Kamala Harris was, how she didn't have anything important to say. So why would she be speaking? I mean, just the typical stuff.
Wow. Wow. That is shocking to me that people would do that on a venue like LinkedIn, even Twitter, because I mean, your name is associated with it. Um, and just feel that it's okay. Like, how is it that we created that environment that people think that that's okay? you know?
I wonder. And so my initial reaction honestly was, I just want to delete this post. Like,
Mhm.
because like energetically, I don't want to have to read these comments either as a
Right,
woman. And
right.
so and then my good friend and our lead speaking coach, Diane Diaz, who I know you know because you
Yes,
worked together in the VIP
yes.
day. And she's like, no, Carol. She's like, you need to leave that post up. And so she started replying to some of them because she's really good at that. And so she did to kind of put them in their place. And then at some point we realized, well, this is just like an energy output that there's no
Right.
ROI back from it. So we just ignore them now.
Right. Well, how do you coach people through this when they see this
Yes.
possible backlash? They want to be authentic. They don't want to just like talk about, on marketing, whatever. They want to like, bring some personality to it. We all have points of view on some controversial issues. Like, how do you coach them to like how much of themselves to put out there, versus just sticking to the facts?
Oh, such a good question, Erin. And here's what I do for myself. And here's what I tell the women that we work with is that number one, know that you may get some criticism and backlash. Not always, not at every single post that you do. You mostly 95% of the time, you're going to get so much support, so much encouragement from when you share either personal stories or share opinions about what it is that you do. So know just going in that it's only a minority of times that this is going to happen. Now, if you talk about quote unquote more controversial topics related to politics, you're going to get more of it than you are if you're talking about like the best ways to use social media. Probably not going to get as much from there. And okay, so number one, know that it's not all the time. Number two, is that have that support system, like we talked about earlier, where you have other women who are doing similar things in the sense of putting themselves out there, because then it normalizes what you're feeling, but then you're not alone. So, and then the third thing I would say is when you get to a certain point, especially on say like Twitter and Instagram, some of the more public platforms compared to LinkedIn, is don't read the comments.
Mm-hmm.
Outsource that to a VA. I know it's hard not to check your own social media, but if you
Right.
get to the point where you feel like you are kind of pushing out some of these stronger opinions that do tend to get more backlash, you may get to the point where you just don't want to read the comments for your own mental sanity. It's just not worth it at a certain point. So have a VA or someone go through them, reply to the good ones or send you the good ones so that you know that and just ignore the rest.
All right, that's great advice. Even on less controversial topics, because everyone has even a point of view about, like for me, writing about like what creates a saleable business, and not everybody agrees with me, believe it or not. And so even assuming we are pushing out of just being an expert and pushing up into the thought leadership realm, you start to kind of diverge from kind of standard practices when you're writing about things. And so just making that leap to thought leadership without being controversial, without intending to be controversial, like that can be really scary too. Like, how do you help people kind of make that leap?
Yeah, it's a process. So I really like to look at it as an iterative process. Like with most things in life, the more you do things, the easier it gets, or the more that you tend to kind of understand what's going on. And so yes, you may have people who disagree with you. That's
Mhm.
actually not a bad thing. It shows that you aren't just kind of saying the same thing that everyone else is saying. You are setting yourself apart. Guys do it all the time. This is like when you Google search thought leaders, all the images that come up are of men and white men in particular, because women aren't seen as thought leaders because we need to put our opinions out more often,
Mhm.
even with the backlash that can come from it. And so I just kind of see it as the way for us to give back to other women by continuing to put ourselves out there. I cannot tell you how many women message me and say like, Carol, thank you for talking about what you do, because it gives me the encouragement to do the same, because we really are those role models for other, even if they never say it to us, they see what we're doing and they realize that they can do the same thing. And I'm sure there are women who are watching your post, Erin, and think, oh, look at Erin. She's putting herself out there. I can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, it's one of my favorite things to talk about is like pushing through the fear, doing it anyway, because I'm still, still doing it.
Exactly.
So, so how is your book coming along, by the way? I know you're writing a book. I want to see where.
Oh, thank you so much for asking. Not no. So it is coming. It is challenging to run a growing business and to set us up enough time for the mental space that I need to really dig into the book. So it's still in book proposal stage. And my book coach is out of the country right now. So I'm very happy about it. As we're recording. So I'm kind of off the hook for this week. So I will be coming back to that, but I'm excited about it because I'm really talking about especially for women stepping into thought leadership, but then also rethinking how we see public speaking. So for so many of us, if we think of a public speaker, we think of like a Tony Robbins, on a stage with like thousands of people, this charismatic public speaker or a politician, giving his stump speech or something like that. And I think public speaking, we see so much as one way, hierarchical, kind of ego-based. And I really want us to think of public speaking as being much more two-way, collaborative, engaging, and participatory between us and the audience. I think as women, we tend to gravitate towards that because of the way that we're socialized, but I think it also makes it so much more interesting for the audience as well. So there's a way for us to do that will give us kind of a leg up on what the men do because we have these qualities that we can channel into this and make ourselves so much better at public speaking and really at sharing a message and activating change.
Well, maybe that answers my question about that, because you wrote about the comparative analysis that you did when you were doing the proposal for your book, and you found these gaps in what's out there versus what you think needs to be included. Is that some of that, or more than that?
Yes,
you found?
yeah. It is definitely related to kind of like this traditional model of public speaking and redefining what public speaking can look like. There are they say that people would rather die than speak in public, or and women tend not to be speakers as much as men, or tend not to have the keynote speeches and things like that. And I think it's because of the way that we have always defined public speaking. So I'm hoping to change that. And then as far as the gap in the public speaking books, they just don't address gender and race at all. It's not even a consideration for them that the way women have to approach public speaking and lending their expertise and authority and thought leadership is going to look different than it is for men who do so.
Just having a diversity of ideas and voices and perspectives. I mean, just by nature of having different people.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about the nitty gritty. So public speaking versus thought leadership, like what's the difference?
So thought leadership is really an umbrella that encompasses what it is how you see the world and what message you want to share to help your audience imagine something better or different for themselves. So I liken it this way. An expert has the answers, which we need. We need experts like the scientists and our doctors and government officials and us and our businesses. We are experts and people come to us for our expertise. We need to continue to do that. Thought leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about asking bigger questions of ourselves and bigger questions of our audiences. We can think of them as why questions. Why are things the way they are? Why are these best practices in our industry? Why is there these gaps in our industry? What can we do about it? So asking those questions. So that's thought leadership. Public speaking happens to be a channel to convey your thought leadership. And in my mind, public speaking is one of the best ways to convey thought leadership because being a speaker gives you that kind of built-in authority for then the thought leadership message that you're sharing.
Gotcha. Okay. And so in terms of public speaking, I mean, we immediately think of getting up on a stage in front of a bunch of people. Like, in what are the many ways that we can be speakers without, getting in front of an auditorium of people?
Yes. So I would encourage you to still do that. Get on a stage and be in front of people, because we need more women doing that. So definitely kind of that, being in person on stages, virtual, which we've been doing for the past 2 years during the pandemic, is certainly also a big part of it. Podcasting, whether it being a host of a podcast like you are now, Erin, guesting on a podcast. It could also be videos. So LinkedIn Lives, Instagram Lives, Facebook Lives, whatever you're doing, some type of video content can be public speaking. It could also be, we got podcast, videos, in-person, virtual presentations. Those are the main ones that I see that most of us do some form of speaking in a way that we're kind of talking to a public audience.
And how does that tie back to building our businesses?
Yeah. So Erin, you may have experienced this I know that I have, and many of our clients have, is that when we speak, whether in person or virtually, we will get leads and clients from that. Because think about it this way, you post something on social media, maybe the algorithms will show it to your followers and maybe they won't. Maybe your followers happen to be paying attention that day. Maybe they're not, but it's kind of like out into the ether of the internet. When you're speaking to a group virtually or in person, you pretty much have a captive audience. Sure, they may be, looking at their phone or looking on a browser, but for the most part, they're captive.
Yes.
And you, again, are seen as that built-in authority, that built-in leader by being the speaker. And so now when they think, oh, I need someone to help me create, build my assets for my business so I can exit one day, or I need someone to help me with my thought leadership and public speaking, they're going to think of us versus someone they may have seen a social media post of from 3 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine the kind of impact. I don't know how many touches that equals. I guess they say like you need to have X number of touches before someone will reach out to you, and how many more touchy it is to be talking to someone instead of them reading your post. So yeah. And just, hearing your voice, seeing the way you express yourself, connecting in that way is just such a more intimate connection than a social media post does. So yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm a huge fan, and I hope, for all of us, when we start speaking and listening to ourselves and seeing ourselves, getting through that, I'm fortunately no longer, I'm very used to what I sound like and what I look like on video and in recordings. But sometimes that can be a little bit of a shock if you haven't the first time. So
yes, it gets easier. It gets easier the more you listen to yourself.
It does. So, what are the trends in public speaking and thought leadership in 2022? I know you just did a podcast about this. But
oh yes, whatever the first week of January is, I always do a trends episode because I find it fun. I like to kind of think about what to think about. So for 2022, I really was thinking a lot about hybrid events. So we did basically all virtual for pretty much 2 years. And I really I'm hoping at least, and I also see a lot of conferences doing a hybrid option where they're excited to get back to in-person, as am I, but they realize that there's a lot of benefit to virtual attendees as well, giving that option to people who either can't travel, have caregiving responsibilities that make it difficult from the travel, the expense, climate change, like, people don't want to fly in an airplane halfway around the world all the time. So I'm glad to see those hybrid events. Now, as a speaker, it becomes a little bit more challenging because we now have to engage an audience both in person and virtually at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to be in person engaged and one thing to be virtual and engaged, but they have to do both at the same time. So we definitely need to hone those skills. That's one big thing. The other thing about thought leadership is really thinking about how to integrate your personal stories, your personal journey into your thought leadership idea, your thought leadership message. As I mentioned before, it's about asking these bigger questions about why are things the way they are. The reason why you probably are asking those questions related to a specific idea is because it has some type of relevancy to you and experiences you've had. So being willing to integrate that personal aspect into what you do is really compelling for the audience. I mean, when you asked me those questions earlier about those experiences I had, that was what led to what I do today. That was my personal journey. So it's very much connected. And it's the same thing for whatever your thought leadership idea is.
Now, I know that, just generally people want to do business with people who they share values with, like in a way that was not the case 10 years ago. Like Coke is doing whatever. I don't care what Coke's doing so long as it tastes good. Whatever McDonald's doing, they got, and now people care and they want to know that they share your values. And so I imagine that trickles down to the small business level, to the entrepreneurs, to the professional services firm that you're engaging. So are there dangers in having like too much personality or expressing that too much? Like, will you turn some people off? Is that okay? You're turning the right people on?
I would say yes, you probably are going to turn some people off. I mean, Erin, we could probably think of some people who put themselves out there with their personal brands or personalities and maybe it just doesn't jive with us. Like we just don't resonate with them. And that's okay because there's lots of other people who do similar things to what that person does. And the same thing for us. Now, so we think about, what we do in our businesses And we don't have the scale of a Coca-Cola or a McDonald's. I mean, they have billions of dollars to spend on advertising so that people always know that they exist. Like literally, you cannot go probably a day without seeing an advertisement or drive down the street and see them. We are not Coca-Cola and McDonald's. So we have to attract the people who are going to be most interested in working with us. And this is what I have found, Erin, and maybe you have found the same thing, is that when we put our values and personality out there, the people who do come and work with us, they get better results, but it's so enjoyable to work with them because there's that alignment there as well. So I feel like it makes the work that I do so much more rewarding because of that. And so I don't see the downside of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the best part of kind of the shift that I've made from kind of more traditional legal work to working with women is that I mean, I get to talk to like really smart women with really interesting ideas. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I mean, like I just chat with them. I'm like, okay, I guess we need to do some business here. But it's just so cool to hear all the interesting ideas that people have, what their dreams are, what their plans are, and it's a very different experience than just kind of being engaged to do a task or. So yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. And Erin, it reminds me. So I have a woman that we worked with a couple of years ago, and she's an attorney. And she was an attorney. Now she does something different in her business, like many women who were attorneys do. And she said that, and she was talking to a law firm not that long ago, maybe 4 years ago, and they or talking with a company who needed to hire a law firm, and the company didn't want to hire law firm A, let's call them law firm A, because they did not have a diverse set of lawyers on their team.
Mm-hmm.
They just did not. It was basically all the white men.
Right.
And so the company was like, no, we don't want that because that does not represent our values either. So there are a lot of companies who are looking at professional services firms too, and using their values as a decision-making filter.
Absolutely. And there is, pressure, frankly, from the top down. I mean, if you're in the government contracting business, and they will expect you to use subcontractors that are diverse. But that's all a good thing, that there is kind of best practices and ethical standards and things like that. That biz, big mis, big businesses are being pressured by their shareholders that are therefore pressuring their vendors or therefore pressuring their subcontractors. So yeah, that is all beautiful. So as you know, one of our missions here is to help create an economy that works for everyone. And so I'd love to hear if there's a person or organization that you admire the work that they're doing in helping achieve that.
Yes, Erin, I love Gender Avenger. Their website is genderavenger.com, and they have a Twitter account, Gender Avenger. And what they do is that when conferences announce their speaker and panel lineups, they go through and they look and they grade them with a pie chart on how many men versus women and how many women of color and people of color versus not. And then they'll award them like different kind of like levels based on how balanced their speaker and panel lineups are. And then what's great about it is that they send out this, and they'll call out the conferences and say, hey, you have all male panels on these topics, need to, add some diversity. But then other people on Twitter who notice conference lineups will tag Gender Avenger and point it out to them so that they can then start to kind of put a little bit of a spotlight on these conferences to let them know that, hey, it's 2022. This should not be going on.
I love it. That is fantastic. Gender Avenger. Yes, we will absolutely have that in the show notes. So tell me what you would, I'm sure you got tons going on at your company. So is there an offer or promotion you'd like to talk about with the audience?
Sure, Erin. So thank you so much. I'm happy to do so. So our signature program is called the Thought Leader Academy. And when women go through it, it's 16 weeks long. We meet weekly on Zoom plus one-on-one coaching calls. And during the program, you work on your thought leadership message and idea and integrating your story, like we talked about, your signature talks, your visibility, your speaking fees, and of course, delivery as well. So it's a comprehensive program. The women who come through it are attorneys or former attorneys, pharmacists,
Recovering
physicians,
attorneys, I
yeah,
think.
recovering attorneys. Yeah, we have like pharmacists, physicians, scientists, coaches, copywriters, strategists. So it's really, I love the diversity of industry as well as a diversity of background that people bring to it. And it's truly just a pleasure every single week to jump on these calls with them and to see what they're working on, help them with their milestones, and to cheer them on.
That is fantastic. And I can say that I have been through the Signature Talk program, which is also wonderful. And so I hope that everyone will check that out as well. Well, thank you so much, Carol. It's been a delight to have you. And as expected, so much goodness in this episode. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Erin.